They say when you leave a place haunted, it remembers you, but sometimes it waits. Evelyn Darren never planned to return to Ashcroft. The small town had been her family's home for more than a century. A quiet place tucked between endless pines and the river that always smelled of rain. To strangers it looked ordinary, peaceful, but to the people who lived there, Ashcroft was a secret no one dared speak aloud. And at the heart of that secret stood the Darren estate. It was the kind of house that made people cross the street rather than walk past it. Tall, grey, with windows like empty eyes. It seemed to lean toward whoever looked at it, as if listening. Generations of Evelyn's bloodline had lived and died there, and now, after 20 years of silence, she was the last one left. The letter had come 3 weeks ago. An official notice, typed, cold and final. We regret to inform you of the passing of Mr. and Mrs. Darren. You are listed as sole inheritor of the Darren property and estate. Evelyn read it 5 times before she let herself breathe. Her parents, dead. The house, hers. She should have felt something. Grief at least. But she didn't. Only a hollow unease, like a door had opened somewhere far away, and something was quietly waiting on the other side. The taxi rumbled up the hill as dusk painted the sky in bruised orange. Ashcroft was smaller than she remembered. Quieter, too. The gas station where she'd bought ice cream as a child was boarded shut. The church bell tower leaned slightly, as if tired of keeping time. When the driver saw the rusted gates of the Darren estate, he slowed down. "Here?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. The man's eyes darted to the mansion. "You sure someone still lives in there?" She didn't answer. He hesitated, then reached for a small crucifix hanging from his mirror and kissed it. That was enough to make her heart skip. She paid him, stepped out, and before she could close the door, he muttered, "You shouldn't stay the night." Then he was gone. The taxi taillights vanished into the trees, leaving her alone with the sound of wind whispering through rusted iron. The Darren estate loomed before her, a massive Victorian house 3 stories tall, its windows fogged from the inside. The roof sagged like a tired spine. The front door, once painted red, was now a dull, flaking brown, its hinges moaning softly as if sighing in pain. She unlocked the door. It didn't open. It breathed. The air inside smelled of dust and damp wood, but beneath that, something else, something faintly sweet like flowers long dead. Her footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. The silence inside wasn't empty. It was listening. Every sound she made seemed to move through the walls, as though the house itself were paying attention. In the foyer hung the same chandelier from her childhood, but half the bulbs were dead, flickering in slow, tired pulses. The portraits along the hall stared at her with eyes painted too real, and at the far end of the corridor, the grand staircase, her breath caught. For a moment, she saw something move at the top, a flicker of white, but when she blinked, it was gone. She unpacked in the old guest room, the one farthest from her parents' bedroom. The furniture was still covered in white sheets, their shapes like ghosts frozen mid-dance. A clock on the wall ticked weakly, each second slower than the last. That night, the rain came, soft at first, then heavy, like fingers drumming against the roof. Evelyn sat on the bed, staring at the old family portrait leaning against the wall, her father stern and distant, her mother, eyes too wide, smile too still, and a little girl between them, her, maybe 7 years old, clutching a small wooden doll. She hadn't thought about that doll in years. She'd buried it in the garden the day she left. Why did she do that? The memory refused to come back. Somewhere down the hall, a door creaked open. She froze. Another sound, soft, deliberate. Footsteps, not heavy like an adult's, lighter. Measured. She stood slowly, her pulse hammering in her throat. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet as she stepped into the hall. The shadows stretched long and thin. The light at the end of the hallway flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. There was no one there, only the faint smell of smoke. And then, "Evie." She spun around. The voice was small, familiar, childlike. "Evie, come play." Her breath caught in her chest. That voice hadn't been heard in decades. It was her own, younger, whispering from somewhere in the house. She called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Just that faint giggle, the sound of bare feet running down the stairs. Then silence. Evelyn rushed to the top of the staircase, gripping the old wooden rail, her heart racing. Below, the foyer was empty. The door was still shut, but on the dusty floor, near the bottom of the steps, something small. She descended slowly. Each step groaned like a warning. There it was, a small wooden doll, her doll, the one she buried. Its head was cracked, one eye missing, the other faintly gleaming in the dim light. She whispered, "No." How could it be here? The wind outside roared, shaking the windows. A bulb popped above her, plunging half the hall into darkness. Then she heard it again. The voice, closer this time. Behind her. "You came back." She turned. At the top of the stairs stood a little girl. Same blue dress, same wooden doll in her hands. Same face, Evelyn's face, from 20 years ago. The child smiled, a slow, wrong smile, and whispered, "Welcome home." Evelyn didn't move. The little girl at the top of the stairs, her own face from years ago, tilted her head, slightly, as though studying a reflection that shouldn't exist. The candle Evelyn held flickered. Then, in a blink, the girl was gone. Only the hallway remained, and the echo of small footsteps retreating into the dark. Evelyn's knees nearly gave way. She clutched the banister until splinters bit into her palm. Her breath came fast, shallow, half-caught, between disbelief and the kind of fear that feels older than reason. She forced herself to whisper, "It's the house. It's just this damn house." But the air didn't agree. The air listened. Morning came grey and slow. Ashcroft's fog rolled in thick enough to swallow the yard. Evelyn made coffee in a kitchen that still smelled faintly, of mildew and something coppery, like pennies soaked in water. Every creak of the house felt timed to her heartbeat. She sat at the table, staring at the cup until it went cold. On the counter lay an envelope she hadn't noticed before, yellowed, with her name scrawled in her mother's handwriting. Inside, one brass key, and a note that simply said, "For the portrait room. Don't stay long." Her stomach turned. There was no room by that name, at least not one she remembered. She spent the next hour searching the second floor. Most of the doors were swollen shut with damp, but at the very end of the hall, behind a moth-eaten curtain, she found a narrow wooden door she didn't recall existing. The brass key fit perfectly. The hinges screamed as the door opened onto dust and darkness. Her flashlight beam sliced through cobwebs. Frames lined the walls, hundreds of them, in rows that reached the ceiling. Family portraits, each face captured in oil and shadow, every Darren from the last 2 centuries. Their eyes followed her, alive with that painted glint artists give to the dead. She stepped closer. Her fingers brushed one frame, her great-grandfather, Nathaniel Darren, the family patriarch. His painted hand rested on a black book half hidden behind him. The tag below the frame read, "The First Promise." She moved along the wall, scanning faces. Her grandparents, her parents, but then the line ended abruptly. Empty hooks. Where other portraits should have hung, a cold whisper brushed her ear. They didn't deserve to stay. She spun around. No one. Something tugged at her attention. The far corner. A lone portrait hung apart from the rest, draped in black cloth. The air around it felt heavier, thicker, as though the room itself didn't want her to look. She reached for the cloth. "Don't," a voice said, soft, almost gentle. Evelyn froze. The voice had come from inside her head, or maybe the wall. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but curiosity was stronger. She yanked the cloth away. The painting beneath showed a little girl in a blue dress standing at the top of the very same staircase where Evelyn had seen the apparition. The background was the Darren estate, exactly as it looked now, decaying, forgotten. But the girl's smile, it was wrong. Too knowing, too alive. And at the bottom corner of the frame, painted in looping script, Evelyn Darren, 1998. Her blood ran cold. She stumbled back, knocking into another frame. The portrait rattled and the eyes blinked. Once, slowly. The sound that came next wasn't human. A wet breath, a sigh from behind the walls. The candle in her hand sputtered out. She bolted for the door, but it slammed shut on its own, rattling the frames. The portraits began to hum. A low vibration through the wood, through her ribs. In the dark, faces shifted, eyes rolled upward. Whispers overlapped into a single sentence. One returns, one remains. Evelyn pounded on the door, screaming for it to open. When it finally did, she fell through into the hallway, gasping. The whispering stopped instantly. The house exhaled, calm again, as if nothing had happened. She didn't go back inside. Instead, she stumbled to the study downstairs, her hands trembling as she searched for answers. Drawers, cabinets, dust-filled boxes of papers, old ledgers, family letters. Most were nonsense. Estate records, receipts, genealogy charts. Until she found a small leather-bound journal tucked behind a clock. It belonged to Margaret Darren, her great-grandmother. The first page read, "Ash and blood bind the name, one soul each generation, that the house may stand." Her hands shook as she turned the pages. Entries described a voice under the floor, the seal in the basement, and the cost of the promise. Margaret's final words, dated 1911, were written in a trembling scrawl. If anyone reads this, leave the house untouched. It knows you. It remembers the ones who left. Evelyn closed the journal slowly. Her reflection in the cracked glass of the study window seemed to move a fraction slower. Then she did. For a heartbeat, it smiled when she did not. Night came again like a closing door. Outside, the fog thickened into something almost solid. The house groaned, timber by timber, settling or waking. Evelyn sat by the fireplace, the journal open on her lap. The flames hissed as if whispering through teeth. She could almost hear words forming in the crackle. Finish what they began. The clock struck midnight. The fire guttered out. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Then another, then the soft patter of small feet running, fast, playful, circling the landing. Evelyn rose, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Stop it," she whispered to the dark. "Stop it." The sound stopped. A hush fell so complete she could hear her own pulse. And then, from the top of the grand staircase, came the faint giggle again. The beam of her light climbed the steps, trembling across the railing, up the wall, until, there, a small figure stood at the top. A little girl, her blue dress torn at the hem, her hair wet, matted with dust. She clutched the wooden doll to her chest. It was Evelyn, 7 years old, smiling that same wrong, perfect smile. The flashlight flickered. The child's eyes caught the beam, glassy, almost painted. Evelyn's throat closed. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The girl tilted her head. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. "It remembers everything." The house moaned deep beneath their feet. Every portrait in the upstairs hall began to rattle in unison. And the last thing Evelyn saw before the light went out completely was her younger self at the top of the stairs, smiling wider than humanly possible. The candles sputtered out, leaving the hallway drenched in grey. For a long time Evelyn stood frozen, staring up the staircase where the child's shape had been. Only the shadows remained, but the smell of damp hair and dust lingered, as if the little girl had only just stepped out of sight. She backed away slowly, one hand grazing the wall. The wallpaper peeled under her fingers. Something sticky clung to her skin. When she looked, it wasn't blood. It was sap, or something like it, oozing from the cracks in the plaster. The house was bleeding. She whispered to herself, "It's just old pipes, just rot." But the words sounded like lies even as she said them. The night deepens. Sleep wouldn't come. She lay on the couch in the parlor, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of her mother's perfume. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard movement, soft scraping above the ceiling, the drag of cloth along floorboards. It always stopped when she opened her eyes. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 3. On the third chime, she heard a voice. Not the child's this time, older, worn thin by years of whispering through walls. "Evie, why did you leave us?" Her eyes flew open. The fire had gone cold. She sat upright, scanning the room. No one. The voice again, closer, gentle, almost sad. "You were supposed to stay. We kept the house for you." Her mother's voice. Impossible. Evelyn rose, following the sound through the parlor door and into the main hall. Each step echoed back twice, as though someone behind her matched her pace. The air grew heavier with every breath. At the far end, a faint orange glow seeped from beneath the study door. When she pushed it open, the light vanished. Only darkness and the faint ticking of the clock. But the scent of smoke was strong, and something else. Her father's cologne. She hadn't smelled it in years. The desk drawers had shifted open on their own. Inside lay the same journal she'd found earlier, now open to a new page. Fresh ink glistened in the candlelight. You shouldn't have buried the doll. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She flipped the page, but the next lines were blank. Then, slowly, letters began to appear, forming in wet black strokes. She wants it back. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun. Nothing but the outline of the doorway, and the faint sound of breathing, slow and rhythmic, like someone asleep and dreaming just out of sight. A memory hit her so suddenly she staggered. Summer, the garden behind the house. She was 7, her parents arguing inside, voices sharp and slurred with drink. She sat in the dirt clutching her doll while the air buzzed with flies. Then a whisper from the garden well. "Evie, trade with me." She'd laughed, pretended it was a game, dropped the doll inside, and a small hand, pale as wax, reached up from the dark water to take it. The memory ended with her mother's scream from the porch. Back in the present, Evelyn stood trembling beside the same study window, rain tapping the glass in a rhythm that almost sounded like knocking. The whisper returned, now from the floor beneath her. "Trade with me again." The wood flexed under her feet, breathing. She stumbled back, slammed the door, and pressed her spine to it until the whispers faded. By morning, she'd convinced herself she needed air, people. She drove into town, the fog curling around her car like fingers reluctant to let go. Ashcroft in daylight was still uneasy. The post office clerk stared too long when she gave her name. The grocer crossed himself when she said Darren Estate. At the cafe, an old woman sat by the window stirring her tea without drinking. When Evelyn passed, the woman caught her wrist with surprising strength. "Your mother tried to burn it," she said. Her voice cracked like dry leaves. "Didn't work. The house keeps what it loves." Evelyn tried to pull away. The woman leaned closer. "You can't live there alone. It feeds on loneliness." She let go only when Evelyn promised to visit the church before nightfall. Evelyn didn't keep the promise. The second night, back at the mansion, the fog had followed her home. It pressed against the windows, milky and solid, hiding the world. She lit candles in every room, pretending light could keep her safe. The portraits seemed to shift in the flicker, as though adjusting their posture to watch her better. Her own childhood portrait, the one from the hidden room, was now hanging in the hallway. She hadn't brought it there. She stopped breathing for a moment. Then the candle nearest the frame flared bright and died. Darkness rushed in. From upstairs came a slow dragging sound, like something heavy pulled across the floor. She climbed the steps, each one colder than the last. The air smelled of wet soil. The sound led her to her parents' bedroom door. It stood slightly ajar. She pushed it open with one trembling hand. Inside, the room looked untouched. Dust thick on the vanity, bed neatly made. But on the sheets lay a small mound of dirt, damp and fresh as if scooped straight from a grave. Something glinted in it. Her old locket, the one her mother had given her before she left home. She picked it up. It was warm. When she opened it, a drop of water fell out, and inside the tiny glass oval, the photograph had changed. No longer her parents, just the little girl in the blue dress, smiling. Lightning flashed outside, and for the first time, she saw movement in the window's reflection. Behind her, a shape standing in the dark corner of the room. She turned slowly, a tall figure, face hidden by shadow, long arms hanging at its sides. It swayed slightly, as if breathing with the house. "Dad!" she whispered. The shape didn't answer. It only raised one hand, pointed toward the door, and in a rasping voice that sounded like wind through the chimney said, "Downstairs. She's waiting." Then it was gone. Only the smell of damp earth remained. She found the basement door open when she reached it. The steps below vanished into black. Cold air drifted up, carrying the scent of rot and candle wax. Each step creaked under her weight. The flashlight beam quivered on stone walls marked with strange, carved symbols, circles crossed by ash-colored lines. In the corner stood a small wooden table. Upon it, a child's tea set arranged neatly. One cup cracked down the side. Steam rose from the cups as though freshly poured. Her heart pounded. Something was down here with her. She could feel it, a pulse in the air, matching her own. Then she heard her mother's voice again, closer, almost kind. "Don't be afraid, Evie. It only wants to remember." The beam of her flashlight trembled across the far wall and stopped on a painting etched directly into the stone. A circle of children holding hands around a black pit. Their faces looked carved from real skin, stretched thin and varnished. A whisper rose from the pit itself. "Play with me." She stumbled back, tripped on the bottom step, and fled up into the hall, slamming the door behind her. Something thudded once against the wood from the other side. Then silence. Evelyn collapsed against the wall, gasping. The lights flickered back to life. Somewhere above her, a music box began to play, slow, uneven notes echoing down the stairwell. She looked up. At the top of the stairs, the same little girl waited, holding the broken doll by its arm. The doll's eye rolled loosely in its socket. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "You buried me wrong." The doll dropped from her hand and hit the step with a hollow thud. Evelyn screamed. The scream died in Evelyn's throat, swallowed by the heavy silence that followed. She clutched the railing, staring up the staircase. The little girl was gone. Only the doll remained, lying on its side, one glass eye rolling to face her. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The doll's porcelain face was cracked, its hair matted with dirt. When she turned it over, a faint breath escaped its mouth. A breath. Evelyn dropped it instantly. It hit the wooden floor with a soft cry, like a child startled from sleep. The next morning, when sunlight finally crawled through the curtains, the house looked normal again, quiet, still. But the feeling wasn't gone. It was hiding. Evelyn tried to act human, boiled coffee, opened windows, turned on music. The sound was thin, muffled, like playing from underwater. Every reflection she caught, on glass, metal, even her phone screen, looked a half-second delayed. She called the real estate agent in town, voice shaking. "I want to sell the house," she said. A pause. Then the man on the other end chuckled softly. "You can't sell what you don't own," he said. "But it says, you inherited it, Miss Darren. But that's not the same as owning it." The line went dead. Desperate for reason, she turned again to her father's journal. Most of it was scribbles and indecipherable dates, but near the back, written in her mother's neater hand, the promise was made long before us. The house keeps its word, and below it, a phrase circled 3 times. The child must stay. Evelyn felt her breath shorten. She flipped to the next page, blank. Then the ink began to bleed through from beneath. Letters forming like bruises on skin. "You left once, Evie. You don't get to leave again." The candle beside her hissed and went out. The house exhaled. By afternoon, the storm broke again. She remembered the old woman's warning and drove to the church on the hill. Inside, candles flickered in rows, their wax puddling into small graves. The priest was old, blind in one eye, but when she said Darren Estate, his face tightened. He led her to the back room, filled with damp records and boxes of faded photographs. He pulled out a leather-bound ledger and turned it toward her. "Your family built more than a house," he said. "They built a bridge." "A bridge to what?" she whispered. He looked up, voice trembling. "To what shouldn't cross." He showed her a faded photograph. The estate's foundation, a wide pit beneath the house lined with symbols. Her great-grandfather standing beside it, smiling. In his hand, the same doll. "It began when your ancestor lost his daughter," the priest said. "He begged something in the dark to bring her back. It did, but every generation since must offer a child. Or the house will take its own." Evelyn stepped back, shaking her head. "No, that's superstition. The lights flickered. One candle went out, then another. The priest grabbed her wrist. "You hear it already, don't you?" he whispered. "It calls your name." Evelyn left before dusk. By the time she reached the estate, the fog was already thick again. The front door was open. It was waiting. She stepped inside cautiously, calling out, "Who's there?" Her voice came back in perfect imitation. "Who's there?" Not an echo, a reply. She closed the door, heart pounding. On the floor, muddy footprints led from the foyer to the parlor. Small prints, barefoot. Children's feet. She followed them, each print darker than the last, until they stopped at the fireplace. The ashes stirred, whispering. Something white protruded from the soot. A child's bone, clean and smooth. Evelyn stumbled back, gasping. Then she heard laughter upstairs, high-pitched, familiar. She climbed the stairs, every step softer than the one before. At the end of the hallway, the nursery door creaked open by itself. Inside, toys were scattered in perfect circles. A rocking horse moved gently, though no wind touched it. And on the wall, new writing appeared, drawn in charcoal. "Welcome home, Evie," she whispered. "What do you want from me?" The answer came from the dark corner of the room, the little girl stepping forward. Her eyes were black, endless. Her voice layered with many others. "You promised you'd never leave me." Evelyn shook her head, tears streaking down her face. "I was a child. I didn't know." The girl smiled. "You did. You made the trade." The doll appeared in her hand again, its mouth opening wider this time. A faint sob echoed from within. "Give it back," the girl said. Evelyn ran from the room, out the back door into the rain. The ground behind the house was soft, sinking beneath her feet. She dropped to her knees and began clawing at the dirt, mud streaking her arms. She knew where the doll had been buried. She remembered. Lightning split the sky as she uncovered a small wooden box. She opened it, and inside lay not a doll, but a shriveled human heart, black and still pulsing faintly. Her scream tore through the rain. From behind her came the whisper again, closer than ever. "Now you understand what you buried." She turned, and the little girl stood inches away, mud dripping from her face, eyes wide with hunger. Evelyn stumbled backward. "Stay away from me." But the girl only tilted her head. "You already let me in," she smiled, and as lightning flashed, her face flickered. For a moment, Evelyn saw her own reflection smiling back. The ground beneath her split with a wet groan. Hands reached up, small, pale, countless, pulling her down. She screamed, clawing at the earth, but the more she fought, the deeper she sank. "Stay," the voices chanted. "Stay, stay, stay." Darkness swallowed her. When her eyes opened again, she was standing in the parlor. The fire was burning, the air was calm, and across from her, in the mirror above the mantel, the reflection smiled before she did. The morning after, when the townsfolk passed the house days later, They saw the curtains drawn for the first time in years. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Music drifted faintly through the cracked windows. A lullaby. Someone had moved in, or something had stayed. Inside, Evelyn sat at the vanity, brushing her hair. In the mirror, her younger self smiled back. The reflection whispered, "Now we can play forever." Evelyn froze in front of the mirror. Her reflection still smiled, calm, patient, almost proud. But she wasn't smiling. She couldn't. The brush slipped from her trembling hand and hit the floor. Her reflection didn't move. It still held the brush, still brushing, still smiling. She stepped back. The reflection stayed. Then slowly, too slowly, it lifted its head, eyes locking onto hers. Not through glass, through her. And it whispered, perfectly synced with her heartbeat, "You promised." The room dimmed, as though the light itself was retreating from her face. Evelyn stumbled, gripping the vanity. Her breath came out in clouds, frost spreading across the mirror's surface, but only on her side. From somewhere deep in the house, a bell began to toll. Once, twice, 12 times, the midnight hour. And as the last chime faded, the mirror rippled like disturbed water. It wasn't her reflection anymore. It was her twin, identical features, identical movements, but older, tired, as though she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Do you remember, Evie?" the reflection whispered. "The game we played the night you left?" Evelyn shook her head, trembling. Her voice came out in a whisper. "No, what game?" The reflection's smile widened. "The one where we swapped places." The mirror cracked. A thin line ran from top to bottom, bleeding black. The reflection reached out, pressing its hand to the glass. Evelyn's own hand lifted against her will, meeting it. The glass was ice cold, then soft, like flesh. "Let's finish it," the reflection whispered. "Let's make the house whole again." The crack spread, webbing outward until the entire mirror looked like a shattered spiderweb of light. Evelyn screamed as the glass moved, pulling her hand inward. She fought, but the mirror was no longer a surface. It was a mouth, and it was hungry. The world on the other side was colorless, soundless. The walls pulsed faintly, like breathing skin. Evelyn stumbled backward, realizing she was now inside the reflection, and the house outside the mirror was moving on its own. The other Evelyn, the one who had smiled, stepped forward in the real room, looked around, then calmly walked toward the window. She inhaled deeply, as if tasting the air, and then she smiled wider. "She's free," the reflection whispered from beside her. "She's you, without fear." Evelyn pounded on the inside of the glass. "Let me out! You can't do this!" But her voice didn't carry. No sound escaped. The mirror only reflected the new Evelyn now, brushing her hair, humming the lullaby their mother used to sing. All around her, the mirror world began to shift. Hallways folded. Doors appeared and vanished. Every portrait on the wall turned its eyes toward her. The faces in them were her family, pale, dead, watching. From the darkness came dozens of whispers. Children's voices, adults crying, laughing, pleading. "You shouldn't have come back. You were chosen. We kept the promise for you. Now it's your turn." The whispers grew louder, twisting into screams. The walls bled. Hands pressed through the wallpaper, reaching for her. One brushed her shoulder, cold, wet, real. And over it all, that soft, familiar voice. Her mother's. "It's all right, Evie. You were born for this." The floor beneath her cracked open, revealing that same pit from the old photograph. The same symbols glowed faintly, pulsing red like veins. And at the bottom, the doll. Waiting, Evelyn sank to her knees, tears streaking her face. "What do you want?" she whispered. The voices answered together, in perfect unison. "To come home." In the real world, the other Evelyn, now wearing her face, moved gracefully through the house. She opened the front door. Fog rolled in. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance and went silent. The false Evelyn smiled into the night. "Home," she whispered. Inside the mirror, the real Evelyn screamed again, slamming her fists against the cold glass. The reflection turned toward her, tilting its head. "Shh," it whispered. "They'll hear you. They'll all come." Evelyn froze. "They?" The reflection smiled. The ones who still remember the promise. And before Evelyn could respond, the mirror went dark, only her own terrified eyes staring back at her, faintly lit by the dull glow of the symbols below. Then, footsteps. From the dark pit below, the sound of something climbing. Slow, heavy, wet. Evelyn backed away. The whispers stopped. Even the air stilled. A figure began to rise from the pit. Not her reflection this time, not the child. Something older, something that had worn many faces. Its voice was the same as the one she'd heard that first night. You came back, child of the house. You bring balance again. You bring blood. She turned to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The walls folded inward. The floor stretched away. The ceiling melted into shadow. The thing reached for her, one long, fingerless arm, and touched her forehead gently. Images flooded her mind. 100 years of screams. Generations buried under the same roof. And the truth, the Darren estate didn't just hold spirits. It fed on them. The curse was never broken. It was only passed down. Back in the real world, the mirror stood still. The fire burned low. And Evelyn, or whatever wore her face, stared into the flames with quiet satisfaction. On the wall, the portraits had changed. Her face now hung among them, painted in oil, eyes lifelike, expression frozen in a silent scream. From the shadows, the little girl's laughter echoed once more, and from deep within the mirror, faint and distant, came a single desperate whisper. "Help me!" The reflection smiled, and then the house went quiet. The next morning, the people of Ashcroft noticed smoke rising from the Darren estate again. They say Evelyn Darren finally moved back in, but when they knock on her door, the ones who enter never come out. And inside, behind the curtains, someone watches them from both sides of the mirror.